Chapter 962. Great kindness, especially when he opened his eyes with clear eyes. All other people knew that he had returned normal. Zhuge Xiaotian pressed his temple and said dumbly, "Father, what's wrong with me? Am I sick again?" Thinking of the horrible and disgusting appearance when he fell ill, Zhuge Xiaotian couldn't help crying, "Father, instead of living like this, you might as well let me die. Living such and such a shameful life. I can't do anything except drinking blood." Zhuge Feng grabbed his son's hand, ignoring the disgusting sores on his hand. Then he said, "Xiaotian, don't worry. Dad has found a doctor who can treat you. You will definitely get better." Lu Zixi also stepped forward and used spiritual power to investigate Zhuge Xiaotian's condition carefully. Then she asked gently, "Young city lord, how do you feel now?" Zhuge Xiaotian frowned in a daze, then opened his eyes slightly and said in disbelief, I think I feel better. I don't have the urge to drink blood. Moreover, I even feel a little hungry." "What?" Zhuge Feng exclaimed. His expression was ecstatic. "Xiaotian, is that real? You are feeling hungry now? You don't want to drink blood, but you want to eat normal spiritual food?" Zhuge Xiaotian touched his flat stomach, and he heard the cooing sound from his stomach. A surprised expression appeared on his face. "Father, I'm really hungry. I want to eat rice." Great, great, great. Dad will ask someone to cook for you now." Zhuge Feng burst into tears with excitement, and his hands grabbing Zhuge Xiaotian's hands were trembling. Quickly asked the servant to serve food for the young master. After a while, an exquisite meal was served. Zhuge Xiaotian almost devoured the food. As the food rich in spiritual power entered his abdomen, the scary sores on his face and body, as well as the suppurative wounds, were all gradually healed. His handsome facial features also appeared. Zhuge Feng looked at his son, eating like a normal person with tears coming out non-stop. He suddenly walked in front of Lu Zixi, bowed deeply to her, and tremblingly said, "Fairy Zixi great kindness, I Zhuge Feng have nothing to repay. But if Fairy Zixi needs my help in the future, I will never say no." Lu Zixi stretched out her hand and waved slightly with a gentle smile. "Lord Zhuge doesn't have to be polite. Zixi is a doctor, and treating patients is what I should do." Lu Zixi was polite, but Ren Shuling was not polite. Seeing Zhuge Feng's gratitude look and seeing Zhuge Xiaotian could eat, she took it as her senior sister had treated him completely. She suddenly jumped out and stretched out her hand to Zhuge Feng. "Uncle Zhuge, my senior sister cured Xiaotian, and you just say thank you? What about the divine soul jade you promised my senior sister? Quickly hand it out." Zhuge Feng hurriedly said, "How would I dare to break the promise with Fairy Zixi? But divine soul jade needs warmth to be stored, so I didn't bring it in my storage ring. I will definitely give it to Fairy Zixi." Ren Shuling nodded in satisfaction, then she turned around, pointed at Hushi and others and sneered, "Right, there are these bitches." Chapter 963. Swindler. Now that my senior sister has cured Brother Xiaotian's disease, it means that this group of bitches has lost. Uncle Zhuge, what are you waiting for? Why don't you quickly kick these swindlers out of the mansion? Zhuge Feng's expression froze, and he looked embarrassed. This, Shuling, wouldn't it be too easy for them to kick them out? Li Jinyu stepped forward and gently shook the fan. Before they go, they must apologize to Zixi and admit that they have lost. They also have to confess to all Yangon City's people on the city wall that they are swindlers. Only that can make up for the offense they did against Zixi. Ren Shuling suddenly laughed while clapping. "Cousin, you are right. Since they lose, they are naturally swindlers. Since they are swindlers, then they should admit their mistakes in front of everyone. Otherwise, we must not let them go." Li Jinyu looked at the doctors and said, "Doctors, you are also witnesses to this medical skills competition. I'm not being overbearing, but this Shi Yu and his followers are really too much. He just wanted to use Zixi's name to gain fame for himself, but he even slandered Zixi and even hurt Shuling several times. Such a bad act, if he is not severely punished, wouldn't he be even more dangerous in the future?" When Li Jinyu said this, the doctors present immediately agreed with him in indignation. "Elderly is right. Shi Yu, this ignorant kid is really too overbearing. He dared to provoke Fairy Zixi. He must be taught a lesson." We are all witnesses. We will take him up to the city wall for a while, and let him kneel on the wall to apologize to everyone. When Master Yuehua saw Zhuge Xiaotian was able to eat and the wound on his face gradually healed, he had a foreboding that Shiyu would lose. He also sighed in his heart. He felt sorry for his bet, but now he heard that this group of people humiliated Shiyu so much, his heart was filled with anger. This Shiyu can see through my illness with his naked eyes, and he can cure my persistent illness for more than 10 years with a single medicinal pill. How could he be a swindler? He endured it, but he couldn't hold it at last. He stepped up and blocked in front of all doctors. Doctors, please listen to me. Miracle healer, she is definitely not the swindler that you think of. I swear by my career that his medical skills and pill refining skills are absolutely superb. Hearing the words, the doctors couldn't but stop and show a suspicious look. Seeing everyone calm down, Master Yuehua hurriedly said loudly, I have witnessed this miracle healer she's medical skills myself. I can guarantee that his medical skills are definitely not worse than Fairy Jishi, and he is far greater than me. He lost to Fairy Jishi only because Fairy Jishi had the upper hand to treat first, not because he is not as skilled as others. If you don't believe it, you can put another test for the two of them. Before Master Yuehua finished, a doctor in his 40s with triangular eyes stepped forward and sneered, Master Yuehua, I heard that you have been suffering from a strange disease more than 10 years ago. Your Dantian can't gather spiritual fire at all, let alone refining pill. Now you don't even have the ability to treat patients. What can you guarantee with? Chapter 964. Yuehua's Nightmare. What? Master Yuehua can't refine pill anymore? You can't see a patient? Is this real? Then Master Yuehua can still be called a fourth-rank doctor? Hasn't he been swindling for more than 10 years then? Wah. He is actually a liar. No wonder this Master Yuehua wants to guarantee Shiyu. Maybe it was Shiyu who discovered Master Yuehua's secret and used it as a threat. After all, if someone knew that he can't refine pill and see patient, his career as a doctor would be ruined. Master Yuehua only felt a bang in his head like being stripped naked and thrown on the street in broad daylight. His face was flushed, and his heart was filled with fear, anger, and sadness. He opened and closed his mouth for a long time, but he couldn't say a word. Over the past 10 years, not being able to refine pills had become his nightmare. He often imagined that his illness was discovered, then he lost his qualifications as a doctor, lost everything, and was never able to practice medicine anymore. This nightmare lasted until he met Shiyu. He thought he finally saw hope. But suddenly, his nightmare and scars were discovered by people. They questioned and mocked him, and the people who mocked him were all his colleagues. This feeling really made him want to die immediately. Zhuge Feng hurried over to defend his friend, but the doctors, who were so agitated that they were deceived, wouldn't listen to him. More and more doctors began to criticize Master Yuehua. Li Jinyu and Ren Shuling glanced at each other, and their faces showed delightful expressions. Lu Zixi lowered her eyes slightly as if she was in a trance, so she didn't notice what was happening here. Li Jinyu saw that everyone's emotions had already been hyped up, so he slowly stepped forward and said in a gentle tone, Doctors, please listen to me. Although Master Yuehua is wrong, he made a significant contribution to Yangon City during that plague 10 years ago, so please forgive him for his deception. After Zixi returns to the Doctors Association, she will also plead for Master Yuehua, hoping that his fourth-rank doctor title can be exempted without penalizing him. Many doctors nodded after hearing this. After all, Master Yuehua still had his reputation. They also had a good impression of Master Yuehua. But there were also some doctors who were very unwilling to do so. They wanted to ruin Master Yuehua today and let him unable to come back forever. The triangle-eyed doctor who spoke the first sneered again. If everyone cheats the Doctors Association and deceives patients and fellow doctors without being punished, there will only be more and more conscienceless doctors in the future. Just look at Shiyu. I think we can't let such a scum go. Doctors who deceive the world like this must be punished severely. Dr. Jiang is right. We must sue the Doctors Association and punish Master Yuehua severely. Bah, you still call him a master? Is he worthy of the title? Master Yuehua's face was pale. His eyes closed tightly, and his hands hanging beside him were shaking. Suddenly, there was a soft sigh in his ear. Master Yuehua turned his head when he heard the sound, and he saw a beautiful face that was as pure as jade and as bright as a moon. The owner of that face was looking at him with an expression of, "Are you an idiot?" Her eyes were full of contempt. However, the eyes of the doctors looking at him were already full of doubts. Hushi sneered and said, "You want to prove that your dantian is not corroded by evil aura? It's very simple. Just condensed spiritual fire like Master Yuehua did. Isn't it enough?" Dr. Zhang's face turned pale, and his body trembled slightly, but he didn't intend to condense spiritual fire at all. Some doctors couldn't help shouting, "Didn't you say that you are not corroded by evil aura? Why don't you condense the spiritual fire?" Chapter 966. Lost? That's right. If you don't condense the spiritual fire, you're the swindling one. We will definitely report to the Doctors Association and let them punish you. Hurry up and condense the spiritual fire. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Facing the aggressiveness of the doctors, Dr. Jiang finally collapsed. He almost instinctively rushed toward Li Jinyu, shouting, "Elderly, you and Miss Ren promised that as long as I say in public that Master Yuehua cannot refine pill, you will ask Fairy Jishi to help me get rid of the evil aura in the dantian. Help me now." Li Jinyu's face was extremely ugly. He kicked away Dr. Jiang with a gloomy face. Then he said coldly, "What are you talking about? When did I promise you?" Li Jinyu's kick was extremely heavy. After being kicked by him, Dr. Jiang hit the wall heavily, vomiting a mouthful of blood and passed out. Everyone was dumbfounded by this scene. Then they looked at Li Jinyu and Renshuling with doubts. Li Jinyu gritted his teeth to suppress the tyrannical anger and murderous intent in his heart before taking a step forward and looking at Hushi coldly. "Shiyu, are you changing the subject now? Even if it proves that Master Yuehua can now pill refining. So what? This will not change the fact that you have already lost to Jishi. In the beginning, you agreed that as long as Jishi cures the young city lord first, then you lose. You want to renege now?" Hushi smiled faintly. Her voice was clear and moving. "Who said I'm going to renege it? Then, it means you have lost." Li Jinyu showed a sinister smile. "Since you are not as good as others, shouldn't you admit your mistakes for provoking and being rude to Jishi? Since you have lost, shouldn't you tell the people of the Yangon city about it?" Hushi slowly put her hands behind her back and took a step forward. Her eyes were gleaming as she said coldly, "Who told you that I have already lost?" As soon as Hushi said this, the entire basement fell into silence. When the doctors looked at Hushi, they thought that she had already gone crazy. Zhuge Xiaotian was now fully awake. There was no bloodthirsty impulse, and he could eat normally. Wasn't that a successful treatment? Someone couldn't help asking aloud, "Boy, you said you didn't lose? Then tell us, how do you win? Isn't the young city lord already completely recovered?" Even Zhuge Xiaotian said in a deep voice, "I used to drink blood every half an hour every day. Sometimes when my spiritual power didn't circulate properly, I would even lose my mind and hurt the others. But after waking up, I don't want to drink blood anymore. My spiritual power is circulating smoothly as well. On the contrary, I feel very comfortable. I think I have been cured." Hushi raised her eyebrows and smiled faintly. Then, "Young Master Zhuge, have you tried exposing yourself to the sun?" This, Zhuge Xiaotian was taken aback. Even Lu Jishi, who had lowered his eyes, raised her eyebrows and gave Hushi a surprised look. But soon, she showed a faint expression, looking at Hushi and said, "It seems that Mr. Shi has heard my diagnosis just now, so I also know that young Master Zhuge is afraid of the sun." After a pause, she turned to Zhuge Feng and continued, "It is true that the young city lord has not yet fully recovered." Chapter 967. See the result in 3 days. The blood released by the blood-sucking golden silkworm only accounts for 1/3 of the blood of the young city lord. It takes at least 3 days to completely replace the blood of the disease in the young city lord. And 3 days later, the young city lord's illness will be completely healed. He doesn't have to be afraid of the sun from then on. Zhuge Feng was immediately overjoyed when he heard the words. The fear he initially had because of Hushi's words receded, and he nodded. It only takes 3 days to heal. We can wait, of course. Zhuge Xiaotian was also full of excitement. He clenched his fists, thinking that he would soon be healed and be able to walk in the sun. He could no longer suppress his sadness and expectation. Ren Shuling laughed at Hushi immediately. Bitch, you hear that? Brother Xiaotian will be healed in 3 days. What else can you say? Why don't you just kneel down and apologize to my senior sister? Ha ha ha. Hushi smiled slightly and looked at Lu Jishi leisurely before saying slowly, Oh, then let's wait for the results to come out in 3 days. After speaking, without waiting for others to speak, he called Nangongyu and others, turned around and left the basement. Lu Jishi stood there, staring at the direction Hushi was leaving, frowning. Li Jinyu walked to her and whispered, Jishi, don't worry about this kind of person. He is holding a false hope. 3 days later, he will lose completely. I see how he can end up. Lu Jishi lowered her eyes slightly and sighed faintly. I'm not afraid that he provokes up front. I'm afraid that he will do something sneaky on my back. I really can't guard against that. It's fine that if I'm the only one getting hurt. If I tarnish my father's reputation, I should really be punished. A fierce light flashed in Li Jinyu's eyes, and he immediately said, Jishi, rest assured, I will never let that kid succeed. Lu Jishi sneered slightly. She didn't talk and walked toward Zhuge Xiaotian. As soon as Hushi and others returned to their courtyard, Baihu couldn't wait to rush over and ask, Princess, that Lu Jishi seems to have some skills. Zhuge Xiaotian really looks more normal now than before. Do you think she will cure the patient? In that case, aren't we going to lose miserably? Qing Wan was making a cup of tea and handing it to Hushi. She sneered and said, Since you don't believe in the princess so much, why don't you go and take out the money you bet now and bet on Fairy Jishi? Baihu shrank his neck and shook his head quickly. I'm not stupid. You see, the princess is so confident. If I bet on Fairy Jishi now, wouldn't I lose everything? But princess, that Fairy Jishi's method really can't cure Zhuge Xiaotian? Even Gu Lufeng couldn't help but curiously ask, Shiyu, are you sure that the assets we have invested in will not be lost? Hushi glanced at Nangongyu, who was the only old god in the whole room without any doubts or worries, and she couldn't help but put a slight smile. She took a sip of the tea made by Qing Wan. She then smiled. I suggest that if you have money, you can add a little more bet. But I want a commission for the crystal stones you earn. This is considered the cost of the valid information I provided. Chapter 968. Secret Princess, do you mean you are confident that Fairy Jishi can't cure Zhuge Xiaotian's disease? When Baihu heard that, both his were beaming. He jumped up excitedly and said, No way. Since it is a sure win, I have to figure out a way to add a little more bet. It's free money. If I don't get it, am I not a fool? Gu Lufeng took a sip of tea and smiled slightly. Rather than adding more bets, it's better to spread the news that Fairy Jishi will treat Zhuge Xiaotian in 3 days. That way, wouldn't we earn a huge sum of profit? Baihu was stunned when he heard it. He slapped the table and said excitedly, Gu Lufeng, you are so amazing. No treacherous, no business indeed. Ha ha ha, I will let people spread the news. This time we will definitely make a huge profit. Xin Qingchua couldn't help but admired Gu Lufeng. She said with her eyes blinking, Brother Lufeng, why are you so smart? Why can't we think of it? Gu Lu's face turned slightly red, but he couldn't help but look at Hushi. You should ask, why is she so smart? Fairy Jishi is already powerful enough. If it's another doctor, I'm afraid he would have given up already. Only Shiyu can make her have nothing to fight back on medical skills. Xin Qingchua chuckled and said, Sister Shiyu is of course amazing. Otherwise, I wouldn't be fascinated. Halfway through the conversation, Xin Qingchua suddenly realized what she was talking about. She ran away quickly with a blush. Seeing her running out of the yard, Gu Lufeng hurriedly followed up for fear that something might happen to her. The people in the room went to work on their own matters. Soon, only Hushi and Nangongyu were left. After everyone left, Nangongyu hugged Hushi into his arms and said with a low smile, You know what's wrong with Lu Jishi's treatment plan? Hushi raised her head and asked instead, You're so sure that I will win? Nangong Yu scratched the tip of her nose and smiled. Sheer. I remember what I said. Even if I don't believe in myself, I believe in you. Hushi smiled, holding his broad palms and gently pinching his fingers, but she said indifferently, in fact, most of Lu Zhishi's treatment plans are correct. But she doesn't know that there is a fatal flaw in her treatment plan. That will cause the final result to collapse. What's the flaw? Hushi raised her head, smiled slyly, and whispered as she approached Nangong Yu's ear. Secret. Naughty girl. Nangong Yu gave a low laugh, turned his head and bit her crystal earlobe like giving a punishment, then hugged her into his arms and kissed her affectionately. On the second day, Zhuge Feng got up early in the morning and went to the basement to check his son's condition. Opening the door of the basement, seeing his son who was having breakfast and his appearance had completely recovered to the previous handsome face, Zhuge Feng couldn't help the tears in his eyes. Zhuge Xiaotian was also in an exciting mood when eating the food in the bowl, as if he was eating the most delicious food in the world. For the past 6 months, he could only drink blood and eat raw meat every day. This feeling was really terrifying. Just after Zhuge Xiaotian had breakfast, Lu Zhishi brought Ren Shuling and Li Jinyu over. At the same time, there were several doctors who had been here yesterday. Most of these doctors were really interested in medical skills. They were basically at the 4th or 5th rank. Mr. Chan was even a 6th-rank doctor. Chapter 969. Delay. Desperately seeing Lu Zhishi, both Zhuge and his son bowed to her in gratitude. Zhuge Feng even took out the jade box containing divine soul jade and handed it to Lu Zhishi, thanking her for saving his son. But Lu Zhishi refused. She smiled softly, but her tone was very firm. City Lord Zhuge, thank you for your kindness, but the medical skill competition is not over yet. If I took the divine soul jade first, Mr. Shi would definitely be dissatisfied. Hearing the words, a doctor suddenly said in anger, that kid Shi was clearing trying to delay desperately. The young city lord looks totally fine now. Fairy Zhishi, you should accept this divine soul jade. But Lu Zhishi shook her head very resolutely. You have heard what Mr. Shi said yesterday. He does not admit that I cured the young city lord. That is, the competition is not over yet. If I accept first this divine soul jade and Mr. Shi and his men spread this out, everyone will say that I seek fame and deceive the public. Zhishi doesn't want to bear the consequences. As soon as Lu Zhishi said this, these doctors all showed resentment and accused Shi Yu of shame. Only Master Yuehua stood aside and said nothing. He glanced coldly at Lu Zhishi, Ren Shuling, and Li Jinyu. He had now guessed that the person who instructed Dr. Jiang to accuse him in public that he could not pill refining must be Li Jinyu. Because only close friends like Zhuge Feng and some elders of the Doctors' Association knew that he couldn't refine pill. Lu Zhishi and Ren Shuling, as the daughter and disciple of the presidents of the Doctors' Association, wouldn't be strange to get this news. Just thinking that they actually used his weakness to indirectly attack Shiyu, Master Yuehua felt a chill in his back. For Fairy Zhishi, a woman whom everyone praised, he had a feeling of scruple against her. After everyone finished chatting, Dr. Chan gave Zhuge Xiaotian another blood exchange under Lu Zhishi's guidance. When this blood exchange was over, the scars on Zhuge Xiaotian's mouth and face almost disappeared. Those terrifying wounds on his hands and feet had also healed. Zhuge Feng looked at his son who was healing at such a speed, and he wished he could kneel down and kowtow to Lu Zhishi. Lu Zhishi's eyes also showed a bit of pride. This vampire disease almost has no treatment in the entire Miluo continent because no one has ever discovered it. But I have read books about this illness and discussed it with my father because of my curiosity. In the end, my father gave me such a treatment plan. Although I have never tried it, I believe that my father's treatment plan must be the most correct. Now, Zhuge Xiaotian's recovery is equivalent to confirming my father's wisdom and strength. When I won after 2 days, I can the divine soul jade to make up for the deficiency of my soul. After that, I can try to advance to the 7th rank doctor and try to refine the 5th grade medicinal pills. So what if Shiyu is great? So what if Shengde Hall can sell the best quality pills? Those medicinal pills are not made by Shiyu himself. Even the best quality pills sold by Shengde Hall are only in the 4th grade at most, but I can refine the 5th grade medical pills at this age. No one has done this before in the entire Miluo continent. At that time, maybe that person will look at me differently, right? Maybe he will feel that I'm better than that Shiyu, right? Chapter 970. Scold badly. Thinking of this, Lu Zhishi's face suddenly turned red, showing a somewhat ashamed expression. She spoke to Zhuge Feng, City Lord Zhuge. After the blood exchange of the young City Lord today, there isn't much root cause left. After all the blood exchange tomorrow, the young City Lord can try to be exposed to the sun. Zhuge Xiaotian stood up excitedly and said, Fairy Zhishi, I exposed to the sun tomorrow? Really? People who had never lost the sun couldn't understand his pain and torture of being locked in a dark basement. Zhuge Xiaotian's desire for sunshine had reached the point of madness. The next day arrived quickly. All the blood in Zhuge Xiaotian's body was replaced by the last blood-sucking golden silkworm and the Lingshuep hill. Lu Zhishi led Zhuge Xiaotian out of the basement slowly, and he finally stood under the sun. The warm sunlight shone on Zhuge Xiaotian's body, stroking his skin little by little. Zhuge Xiaotian looked a bit terrified, but he soon discovered that there was no pain. Unlike before, his skin would have red spots as soon as it was exposed to the sun. He opened his arms to embrace the sunlight. Suddenly, he turned to look at Zhuge Feng and said in a trembling voice, Father, look, I didn't feel uncomfortable under the sun. Zhuge Xiaotian wiped the tears on his face and nodded. His eyes filled with joy and happiness. This scene in the courtyard of the city lord's mansion quickly spread throughout Yangon City. Suddenly, the people in Yangon City who were full of confidence in Fairy Zhishi crazily supported her. And the odds in Chang'e gambling house that were stabilized by Nangong Yu suddenly jumped to more than 1,300. As for Shiyu, who wanted to use Fairy Zhishi's reputation to increase his fame, was scolded by everyone. Everyone was waiting the announcement that the young city lord had recovered the day after tomorrow. Then they would let Shiyu kneel on the city wall to beg everyone for mercy. Master Yuehua, who originally had an excellent reputation in Yangon City, would be implicated by Shiyu. Master Yuehua made medicinal pills to control the plague more than 10 years ago, saving the lives of hundreds of people in Yangon City. At that time, all people of the Yangon City truly regarded him as a hero and savior. However, more than 10 years have passed. Many people who had survived that plague had either left the city or had forgotten about the plague. Some old people who had no cultivation had long been dead. In the past 10 years, Master Yuehua didn't refine any special elixir, and he hadn't been treating people. Slowly, everyone forgot about the savior of Yangon City. Although some people remembered his past achievements, most of them didn't care much. Besides, in the competition between Fairy Zhishi and Shiyu, someone reported that Master Yuehua had favored Shiyu several times because of his own self-interest, which caused Fairy Zhishi to suffer great injustice. In particular, Master Yuehua had long been unable to refine pills and treat patients, but he had been deceiving everyone with the title of the 4th-rank doctor. Once such a rumor came out, everyone had a bad impression of Master Yuehua. Chapter 971. Rumors. In the past 2 days, in addition to discussing the medical skills competition between Fairy Zhishi and Shiyu in the tea house and restaurant, many people also cursed and condemned Master Yuehua's shameless deception. I admired Master Yuehua so much, but I didn't expect him to be such a deceitful person. No wonder Master Yuehua wasn't willing to come to my house to treat. It turns out that he is unable to treat at all. I have told you that Master Yuehua is old. Even if he can still pill refining, he is no more than a 4th-rank doctor in the past 10 years. But Fairy Zhishi is extremely beautiful. She was a 6th-rank doctor at the age of 20s. Isn't it easy to judge who is strong and who is weak? I just didn't expect this Master Yuehua to be so shameless. Never mind that he deceives everyone. He even spoke up for the bastard Shiyu. It's no wonder that his true face has been exposed now. This is his own responsibility. Master Yuehua stood at the entrance of the restaurant, and the dim light in his eyes had already turned into despair. He didn't say anything, but he turned around and stumbled away. Along the way, there were people pointing at him. The look of admiration and gratitude in the past had now turned into contempt and doubt. It was like he had fallen into hell in just one night. This Yangon City, where he had lived for decades and which he regarded as more important than his own life, was now so unfamiliar to him that it terrified him, making him want to escape. Master Yuehua returned to the city lord's mansion in despair. As was about to walk to his courtyard, a man's smiling voice came from behind him. Master Yuehua. Yuehua turned her head and immediately saw Li Jinyu's half-smile and eyes full of cold and contemptuous expression. Master Yuehua was stunned for a moment. Before he could reply, Li Jinyu said slowly while waving his folding fan gently, Master Yuehua, have you ever heard that rumors are like a flame blown by the wind? People always believe in the truth that is easy to believe in. So what if, Master Yuehua, you can prove that you can refine pill in front of the other doctor? Will anyone in Yangon City believe in you? You did all these. Yuehua's body trembled all over. He pointed at Li Jinyu and yelled, Li Jinyu, you despicable villain. It's you who told Dr. Jiang that I can't refine pill. It's also you who spread this news to the citizens of Yangon City. What do you want from me? Li Jinyu smiled, waving the fan casually, but he was looking at Master Yuehua with a cold gaze. So what if I was the one who spread the rumors? Will anyone believe in you now? Even if you show your spiritual fire in front of everyone, they will only think that you are tricking them. No one will ever believe in you anymore in this Yangon City. From now on, you will become a rat that is hated by everyone. What enmity do I have with you? Why do you want to frame me like this? Master Yuehua stared at Li Jinyu with bloodshot eyes. Li Jinyu said coldly, you know that Jishi has promised Zhuge Feng to treat Zhuge Xiaoyan's illness, but you still brought in those bitches. They hurt my cousin, and they even humiliated Jishi. This is your biggest sin. You ask why I want to harm you. He gritted his teeth and said, Li Jinyu, aren't you afraid of retribution for doing these despicable things? Li Jinyu sneered, closed the folding fan in his hand, and said in a deep voice, whatever you say, but Master Yuehua, are your reputation and Zhuge Feng's future more important than Shiyu? I think you know what to choose, right? Chapter 973. On the city wall, as soon as he finished speaking, he threw a porcelain bottle at Master Yuehua. Master Yuehua held the icy surface of the porcelain bottle with his body trembling violently as if he wanted to crush the porcelain bottle, but he didn't do it in the end. Nothing. He had no choice in such a desperate situation. Li Jinyu laughed smugly, turned around and left quickly. After Li Jinyu left a whole cup of tea, Master Yuehua stumbled and walked to his yard with the porcelain bottle. When the figures of the two people disappeared completely, a black figure in the grass in the distance came out, thought for a moment, revealed a deep smile, and then quickly disappeared. Another day had passed. Zhuge Xiaoyan's symptoms got better and better. After all his blood was exchanged and confirmed that the sun would not harm him anymore, Zhuge Xiaotian did not rush to bask in the sun. Instead, he meditated and channeled his spiritual power throughout his entire body and dantian. This made his scars recover more quickly. Especially the scars on his face were completely recovered. Zhuge Feng was so excited for Zhuge Xiaoyan's recovery that he could not sleep at night, wishing to announce to the entire Miluo continent that his son had recovered. Therefore, when Li Jinyu proposed to announce the result of Fairy Jishi's treatment on the city wall tomorrow in front of all the people in Yangon City, Zhuge Feng agreed without hesitation. Although he felt sorry for Shiyu, the Zhuge family owed Fairy Jishi too much. If this was what Fairy Jishi hoped, he could only sacrifice Shiyu. It was the third day soon, which was the day for the results of the medical skill competition to be decided. Just after 9 a.m., in front of the city lord's mansion, a crowd had gathered there. Some of these people were ordinary people or low-rank martial artists, but some were high-rank martial artists above the meridian stage, and there were even many gold core stage experts. It could be said that the entire Yangon City people were looking forward to the outcome of Fairy Jishi's treatment, and were also looking forward to the final result. At 15 minutes, Zhuge Feng opened the door and walked into Zhuge Xiaoyan's room with a smile on his face. Xiaotian, are you ready? The city residents have been waiting outside for almost an hour. But as soon as he saw Zhuge Xiaoyan's face, Zhuge Feng frowned slightly. Xiaotian, why is your face so pale? Is your illness relapse again? I will ask Fairy Jishi to come and see you again. I'm fine. Zhuge Xiaotian quickly stopped his father. Father, I'm really fine. Please don't trouble Fairy Jishi anymore. Maybe it's because I'm too excited that I can't sleep well and meditate well, so I look a little tired. I seem to have a slight fever as well, but I will take a good rest after today. Zhuge Feng breathed a sigh of relief when he heard this. Then he smiled. Since you are fine, let's go up to the city wall. Zhuge and his son went up to the city wall. At the same time, Fairy Jishi and Hushi were also led to the city wall, accompanied by the group of doctors who had been watching Fairy Jishi treating Zhuge Xiaotian these days. The people of Yangon City underneath saw Zhuge Xiaotian appear in front of them, and there was a clamor all of a sudden. Did you see that? Isn't that the young city lord? He hasn't shown up for more than half a year. Chapter 974. Announce the result. I heard that the young city lord is sick and can't expose to the sun. See, isn't he fine now under the sun? That means the young city lord's disease is really cured by Fairy Jishi? Fairy Jishi actually treated the illness that even the 7th-rank doctor can't treat. She is really amazing. The sun shone on Zhuge Xiaotian, making his pale and handsome be visible. Everyone could see that Zhuge Xiaotian was healthy, normal, and intact. This was the best proof that Fairy Jishi had cured him. Ren Shuling heard the comments and admiration from the people below, and she immediately stepped forward and mocked Hushi. Bitch, you have seen the appearance of the young city lord now? What else do you have to say? Kneel down to my senior sister and admit your mistake now. Hushi glanced at Zhuge Xiaotian faintly. His face was a little paler than just now, and there was even a faint glow on his skin which made his face even more charming. However, when no one was paying attention to him, Zhuge Xiaotian's eyes were in a daze. His lips became blushing. He even licked his lips and wiped his forehead with his hand. Hushi breathed out slowly, shook her head lightly, and thought in her mind, as expected. Ren Shuling saw her sigh and shook her head, thinking that she finally gave up this time. She couldn't help laughing. Senior sister, did you see? That bitch she was pretending a few days ago, saying that there is something wrong with your treatment method. It turns out that he just doesn't want to admit defeat. Now he is panicking seeing that there is no opportunity to come back. Li Jinyu took a step forward and said coldly, so what if you panic? You think you don't have to kneel to Jishi because you panic? As Li Jinyu said, he looked at the people of Yangon City below. Everyone in Yangon City, I believe that everyone knows the pressure and torture that Jishi has endured in the past few days. Although she gets it through because of her tenacity and superb medical skills, the culprit is in the front right now. Doesn't he need to be punished? We must punish this scum who humiliated Fairy Jishi. Let him kneel down and kowtow to Fairy Jishi. Kick him out of Yangon City. No, kick him out of Tiangang Kingdom, so that he will never come back. City Lord Zhuge quickly announced the result of the competition. Then let this scum kneel to Jishi now. Yes, yes. City Lord Zhuge, please announce the result of the competition. Our bet in Changle Gambling House is still waiting to be redeemed. The voices that supported Fairy Jishi and cursed Shiyu below came like a tsunami. Zhuge Feng couldn't help but glance at his friend Master Yuehua under this situation. Master Yuehua had a pale face, but his expression was cold. He didn't mean to object. Then he breathed a sigh of relief, slowly stepped forward, raised his hand and waved it down. Please be quiet, everyone. Now, I will announce the result of the competition between Fairy Jishi and Shiyu. When Zhuge Feng said this, even Bai Hu on Hushi's side was panicking. He leaned close to Hushi's ear and whispered, Princess, Zhuge City Lord is about to announce the result. Is this Fairy Jishi really going to win? Then wouldn't the crystal stone we bet be all gone? Chapter 975. It's too late. Hushi sighed softly and said, It's too late. What? It's really too late? Bai Hu's face turned pale. He glanced in the direction of Nangongyu and said tremblingly, Are we really going to lose all our capital? Ahem. That is, all the crystal stones and magic weapons of the King of Hell Mansion. Hushi glanced at him lightly and said with a slight smile, I mean, there is no need to stop him. Zhuge Feng can't finish the announcement. As soon as Hushi finished speaking, Zhuge Feng continued, 3 days ago, Fairy Jishi provided a treatment plan to diagnose and treat my son Zhuge Xiaoyan's strange disease. After 3 days of treatment, Xiaoyan's disease has now been completely cured. So, I announced that the result of the competition between Fairy Jishi and Shiyu, Jishi, father. Before Zhuge Feng finished his last sentence, Zhuge Xiaotian, who had been standing aside, touching his forehead and licking his lips, suddenly let out a scream. Then he pounced at guard next to him with red eyes. The sharp teeth pierced the guard's neck. Then the terrifying sound of drinking blood sounded on the deadly silent city wall. Such a terrifying blood-drinking sound continued for several seconds before someone finally reacted. The entire scene was in chaos. The guards rushed to pull Zhuge Xiaotian off from the guard. The guard let out a weeping cry. A large piece of flesh and blood was torn off from behind his neck. The wound was horrible. The guard could only scream for once. Then he fainted in horror. Zhuge Xiaotian was still screaming and struggling after being ripped off by the guards. On his hands, face, and neck, dense red spots began to appear. These spots quickly grow and rot under the sun's rays, and the blood was mixed with pustule, giving off a nauseating rancid smell. Zhuge Feng suddenly jumped onto Zhuge Xiaotian, who was restrained by the guards, and shouted in a panic, Xiaotian, what's wrong? Don't scare father. But Zhuge Xiaotian was struggling constantly. His eyes were blood red. He bared his teeth, revealing the slowly rotted lips and teeth inside. The scene was too terrifying, and the changes were too strange. Suddenly, the people below fell into a strange silence. They looked straight at Zhuge Xiaotian's current appearance with their eyes widened. Hearing the terrifying screams and teeth-rubbing sounds, they all showed horrified expressions. Although they knew that the young city lord was sick, they never thought it would be such a terrifying disease. They never thought that such a horrible scene of patients sucking blood and eating flesh would appear in front of them. Zhuge Feng, who kept yelling Zhuge Xiaotian, suddenly seemed to think of something. He turned his head vigorously and shouted, Fairy Jishi, come and see what happened to Xiaotian. Didn't you say that he has been cured? What's wrong with him? Quickly come and see. Fairy Jishi was also shocked by what happened before her eyes. She reacted abruptly when she heard Zhuge Feng's words, and hurriedly came to Zhuge Xiaotian. Chapter 976. Didn't you say it's cured? However, at this time, she was really panicking. She had just one thought in her mind. How could it relapse again? How could it happen? My treatment plan can't go wrong? Daddy can never go wrong. It must not be because of the wrong treatment, but Zhuge Xiaotian is poisoned again. That's right, it can never be because my treatment failed. I only need to check at Zhuge Xiaotian's aura, then I will know. As Fairy Jishi walked, she shook her head heavily as if to convince herself and as if to give herself confidence. However, as soon as she walked to Zhuge Xiaotian and was about to check out his aura, Fairy Jishi couldn't help tremble seeing Zhuge Xiaotian's current appearance. Zhuge Xiaotian's appearance was more terrifying than when he was in the basement that day. His face had already been covered in red spots all over, and most of them had begun to ulcerate. Together with the spooky teeth and bloodthirsty eyes, it terrified the surrounding people and made their stomachs rolling. Zhuge Feng was worried about his son's illness, but he saw Lu Jishi being stunned there with a look of fear and disgust. He couldn't help but furiously said, Fairy Jishi, why are you standing there? Give Xiaotian treatment quickly. Lu Jishi woke up suddenly. Her face turned pale, but she quickly regained her senses and released a white smoke. White smoke spiraled into Zhuge Xiaotian's nose. Zhuge Xiaotian, who was screaming and struggling, quickly calmed down and closed his eyes, but his body seemed to be twitching because of some pain. When Lu Jishi saw Zhuge Xiaotian finally calm down, he was also quietly relieved. Then she looked at Zhuge Feng and said sternly, City Lord Zhuge, it stands to reason that the young city lord's illness should be cured. I don't know if someone else did something later. This requires a detailed examination and diagnosis. But now we should move the young city lord to a place where there is no sunlight. Zhuge Feng frowned with a gloomy face, and his knuckles were making a crackling sound. He was originally ecstatic that his son had recovered, but his son suddenly became worse and more painful than before. This feeling of losing hope was even worse than Xiaotian was never cured. It made him even more furious. However, he calmed down and ordered the guards on the side, immediately carry the young city lord back to the basement. Several guards came forward, and the Yangon city people were in chaos. What happened to that just now? Isn't he cured now? Did you see the young city lord's look just now? It's so terrifying. If this isn't cured, wouldn't the young city lord become a cannibal monster? Then who is the winner between the medical skill competition of Fairy Jishi and Shi Yu? However, just when everyone was talking about the noise, another sudden change happened on the city wall. When the guards rushed over and tried to carry the fainted Zhuge Xiaotian down the city wall, his body convulsed suddenly. He broke away with his bloodthirsty eyes. The guard closest to Zhuge Xiaotian was stunned by his bloodthirsty eyes. Immediately afterward, the guard was held on his neck. Then he felt a sudden severe pain. Zhuge Xiaotian had bitten off a piece of meat together with his clothes. Chapter 977. It's too late, ah? The guard screamed, and the situation on the city wall became chaotic again. Lu Jishi had never thought that Zhuge Xiaotian, who was fainted by her knockout scent, would wake up again. She was stunned for a while with a look of panic. Suddenly, Li Jinyu's panicked voice came into her ears. Jishi, be careful. As soon as the words sounded, Lu Jishi felt a stinky smell rushing over his face. Then a scary face full of red spots and bloodstains appeared in front. He bit toward her neck. Lu Jishi let out a horrifying scream. Then she took out a crossbow without even thinking about it. This hand crossbow looked no different from the crossbows used by mortals, but it was forged with heavenly heartwood that was more than hundreds of thousands of years old. The arrows were even smeared with deadly poison. It was called Divine Mechanic Crossbow. Zhuge Feng almost recognized this Divine Mechanic Crossbow at first sight. Almost everyone in the Miluo continent knew that the Divine Mechanic Crossbow was Lu Shuyang's life-saving weapon when he was young. After he became famous, he left this treasure to his only daughter. The firing speed of the Divine Mechanic Crossbow was very fast. In addition to its highly poisonous arrows, it could easily penetrate the protective shields and flesh of martial artists. Even the martial artists of the nascent soul stage could be seriously injured by the Divine Mechanic Crossbow, let alone Zhuge Xiaotian of the Meridian stage. If he was hit by Divine Mechanic Crossbow, he, who was severely ill initially, would almost certainly die. Fairy Jishi, show mercy. Zhuge Feng yelled in horror. However, it was too late. The sound of the Divine Mechanic Crossbow blasted through the air, and the arrow flew toward Zhuge Xiaotian's forehead. No! Zhuge Feng's eyes were widened as if blood and tears would gush out. His only son, his Xiaotian, was going to die in full view of everyone like this. Suddenly, Zhuge Feng's expression froze in horror. He stared stiffly at the man in black that suddenly appeared in front of Zhuge Xiaotian. For a long time, he felt a pain in his chest before he realized that he was holding his breath. He saw that the man in a black robe had a cold and unparalleled handsome face. The pair of starry eyes seemed to contain the coldest frost in the world, coldly looking at Lu Jishi. His slender fingers caught the arrow in his hand. The Divine Mechanic Crossbow, smeared with lethal poison, was the common iron in his fingers. He pinched, and the arrow turned into powder. Zhuge Feng took a deep breath and couldn't believe his eyes. Even the martial artists of the nascent soul stage will have danger touching the arrow of the Divine Mechanic Crossbow, but the young handsome man before him can easily catch the heavenly wood arrow and turn it into powder. Who is this man in black? However, Zhuge Feng was only shocked for a moment, and he looked back at his son soon. At this time, Zhuge Xiaotian was no longer in a bloodthirsty mode. His body was still struggling, but his aura slowly calmed down. And standing beside him was the beautiful, unparalleled young man miracle healer, Shi Yu. Chapter 978. Shameful means at this time. Purple vines continued to appear on his hand. As the purple vines soared into the sky, the sun was shielded from the purple vines, casting a big shadow on the city wall. It was like a giant purple umbrella, shrouding Zhuge Xiaotian in the shadows. As the sun's rays disappeared, Zhuge Xiaotian's red eyes slowly recovered their clarity, revealing a look of confusion. Lu Zixi also recovered at this time. She looked back at the man in black with a complicated gaze. It took her a long time to recover and say, Zixi used the divine mechanic crossbow just now in a panic. Thanks to the help of Mr. Nangong that Zixi didn't murder the innocent. Zixi is really grateful. It was Nangong Yu who caught the divine mechanic crossbow, and only Nangong Yu could do it. He smiled coldly when he heard Lu Zixi's words. He didn't even look at her, but he turned and walked to the side of the young man who was checking Zhuge Xiaotian's pulse. He whispered a few words in his ear. The Shiyu's clear and beautiful eyes slightly bent. Her face was full of helpless and disgusted smile. She gently pushed him. Nangong Yu, who was pushed aside, wasn't annoyed at all, but he was looking at Shiyu with tenderness and pampering that could drown people. Lu Zixi clenched her fists, walked up, squatted down and said coldly, Mr. Shi, my treatment has not been completed yet. Are you going to go over me and treat the young city lord directly? Hushi glanced at her with a half-smile. The contempt in her eyes was obvious, making Lu Zixi's anger surged into her mind. However, after all, she held it back. She cast spiritual power into Zhuge Xiaotian's body as usual. When her spiritual power circulated Xiaotian's body for one round, her eyes widened in shock. She murmured, How is this possible? He is still fine yesterday. How could he suddenly become like this? Senior sister, what's the matter? Ren Shuling was shocked by these incidents just now. After she recovered, she rushed to Lu Zixi's side immediately with Li Jinyu. Li Jinyu gave Hushi a cold look and said in a deep voice, Is someone doing tricks behind the scenes? I said earlier that some people will use shameful tricks in the dark if they can't win openly. Li Jinyu said this very loudly, and the people in Yangon City below heard it. Lu Zixi shook her head slowly and frowned. She raised her voice slightly. I don't know what's going on. When I checked yesterday, the blood of the young city lord was already normal, but his blood has returned normal today. I don't know who did this. Isn't it obvious? Ren Shuling immediately glared at Hushi and said loudly, Apart from those who are afraid of losing, who else would do this? Even Lu Zixi said that someone did some petty means. The people below of course believe in it a little more. Many people cast doubtful eyes on Hushi. Hushi was questioned by everyone and did not say much. Instead, she looked at Zhuge Xiaotian, who was sober, and smiled slowly. Young city lord, have you eaten after being inspected by Fairy Zixi yesterday? Have you met anyone? Zhuge Xiaotian shook his head without hesitation. I was meditating all the time yesterday, but I felt upset and unable to concentrate. Since yesterday afternoon, I have no appetite, so I have never been eating anything. On the one hand, it was the president of the Doctors' Association. On the other, it was the miracle healer who might cure his son's illness. He had seen the method that Shiyu used to wake Zhuge Xiaotian just now. At this moment, he finally affirmed that it was not Fairy Zixi who calmed Xiaotian down in the basement that day, but the young miracle healer. Before Zhuge Feng had spoken, Bai Hu had already laughed and said, So you can't afford to lose? You can't even afford to let us try. It turns out that Fairy Zixi is just fishing for fame and credit. Chapter 980. Copying treatment method. Ren Shuling was furious. What are you talking about? You dare to slander my senior sister. Do you think this Shiyu can cure a patient whom my senior sister can't even cure? Stop dreaming. Li Jinyu was so angry that his body was trembling. Shut your damn mouth. If you dare to insult Zixi again, I will let you die horribly. Bai Hu sneered. It's really funny. You can do shameless things, but the others can't judge you? At first, Fairy Zixi used the reason of first come, first served to treat the patient first. This is unfair already, But my young master is magnanimous, so he didn't say anything. Now that she can't cure the patient, then it's my young master's turn to treat. Am I wrong? Or, what Fairy Jishi said at the beginning for the sake of the patient was a lie. For the sake of her own face, she doesn't even care about the life and death of the patient? Although Li Jinyu and Ren Shuoling kept saying that Lu Jishi was humiliated before, Hushi did not say too much. But now Bai Hu didn't hold back and criticized Lu Jishi as a worthless person. Let alone Li Jinyu couldn't bear it. Even Lu Jishi's pretty face turned pale in anger. She stepped forward and said coldly, "When did I say that Mr. She is not allowed to cure the young city lord? I just—" Bai Hu laughed 3 times when he heard the words. He did not give her a chance to continue speaking. Well, since Fairy Jishi said so, it means that Fairy Jishi admits that she can't cure the young city lord. Now it's my young master's turn to show his medical skills. Lu Jishi was out of words. Her face flushed suddenly, and she felt embarrassed and humiliated. Li Jinyu, as compared to being humiliated himself, felt even more pain and resentful when he saw that Lu Jishi was humiliated. He originally wanted to say, but he suddenly looked up and met Master Yuehua's cold gaze. Then, Master Yuehua nodded unwillingly. Li Jinyu was overjoyed. He slowly revealed a sneer. Jishi, since they insist on treating the young city lord, then let them try. However, if something goes wrong and the young city lord suffers irreparable damage, then it has nothing to do with us. He looked at Zhuge Feng and said, I also hope that City Lord Zhuge will not regret his decision later on. Zhuge Feng was taken aback for a moment. He had a hint of an unknown premonition in his heart. However, when he saw Zhuge Xiaoyan's miserable appearance now, he gritted his teeth, bowed to Hushi, and said with a sob, Miracle Healer Shi, if you really have a way, please save my son. Hushi nodded. Then she smiled faintly. Now I can start the treatment. City Lord Zhuge, please bring me enough blood-sucking golden silkworms. What? Blood-sucking golden silkworm? The onlookers on the city wall couldn't help but exclaim, Isn't this the treatment method Fairy Jishi has used? Are you going to copy Fairy Jishi's method? Another person also said, What's a joke? Everyone just saw that this method can't cure the young city lord's disease at all. Ren Shuoling even laughed and said, Shiyu, I thought you were so capable. In the end, you are just copying my senior sister's treatment method. Chapter 981. What's the flaw? Hushi ignored them, but squatted to Zhuge Xiaoyan's side, took a bit of his blood with a knife, and then used her spiritual power to feel it. She knew his situation immediately. Zhuge Feng hesitated. Miracle Healer Shi, what method are you going to use to treat Xiaoyan's disease? Blood-sucking golden silkworm can't cure him at all. You don't need to be suspicious when you decide to use someone. Hushi turned around and looked at Zhuge Feng coldly, and she said in a deep voice, City Lord Zhuge doesn't even understand this principle? When Fairy Jishi was doing the treatment, would you question him like that? Zhuge Feng shook his whole body, and he subconsciously bowed his head and apologized. After that, he did not dare to delay and quickly asked his subordinates to prepare blood-sucking golden silkworms as soon as possible. The blood-sucking golden silkworms were quickly fetched, and the treatment process was as expected. It was almost exactly the same as Lu Jishi's. The only difference was probably the medicinal pills that nourished blood. Although Lu Jishi's Lingxue pill was precious, the blood it could replenish was only 1/3 at most. Therefore, during Lu Jishi's treatment, she had to go through the process of blood-sucking and releasing blood 3 times. It couldn't be finished on the same day, otherwise the patient would not be able to bear it and would die of shock due to excessive blood loss. The medicinal pills that Hushi gave Zhuge Xiaotian were the best quality 4th-grade medicinal pills. Their main function was to nourish blood, but Hushi had just refined them, so she hadn't named them yet. Zhuge Xiaoyan's blood almost recovered instantly after taking these medicinal pills. After an hour, the blood on his whole body had been completely replaced. The dense red spots and festers on his face had already healed a lot by now, and Zhuge Xiaoyan's eyes were also clear. However, no one would approve of Hushi's behavior. Even on the city wall, Many doctors looked at Hushi as if they were looking at a scum stealing other people's things. Li Jinyu and Ren Shuling were even more mocking, sometimes amplifying their voices to explain the ins and outs of the matter to the people of Yangon City below. When Lu Jishi saw Hushi take back the blood-sucking golden silkworm one by one, all Hushi's actions were exactly the same as her. She finally couldn't help but take a step forward and say gently, "Mr. Shi, although I don't mind you stealing from me, we have just witnessed that the effect of this treatment method can only last for 2 days. It can't completely cure the disease. You will only disappoint City Lord Zhuge and young City Lord again. Why would you want to do that?" Hushi threw the blood-sucking golden silkworm to the tray in by whose hand, then she stood up, slowly looked at the doctors present, and finally turned her gaze on Lu Jishi. "Fairy Jishi, you keep saying that you know that this is a vampire disease. Then do you know what caused the vampire disease?" Lu Jishi was taken aback. She blurted out, "What? The so-called vampire disease is indeed a blood disease. But does Fairy Jishi think that the cause of the disease can be completely cured by exchanging blood?" Lu Jishi frowned and said in a low voice, "Since the blood is poisoned, what's wrong with changing his blood? And Mr. Shi, aren't you doing this too?" "I followed Fairy Jishi's method to treat the disease, but there is a fatal flaw in your treatment plan." Some of the doctors listening to the side could not help but say loudly, "What is the flaw?" Chapter 982. Special medicinal pills. Bloodletting can only remove the toxins from the patient's blood for a while, but not the root cause. Once the patient is exposed to the sun, something in his body will convert into toxin again. The disease will only be more serious than the previous one. In fact, patients with porphyria, which was vampire disease, did not just have problem in their blood. It was even more because an element called porphyrin in their body would be converted into a toxin called botulinum toxin when exposed to ultraviolet light. So, Hushi smiled and looked at Lu Jishi with scorching eyes. "Fairy Jishi, you have diagnosed the wrong direction from the beginning. You know that the problem comes from blood, but have you ever wondered what its source is? The most important treatment for vampire disease is not to exchange blood, but to eradicate the source of the young city lord's disease that will turn into toxins when exposed to sunlight." Lu Jishi originally wanted to laugh. How can there be such a disease in the world? Whenever it is exposed to the sun, it will be converted into toxins in the blood. Not to mention her, even her father Lu Shuyang had never heard of it. She opened her mouth slightly, but the words were stuck in her throat, because she met Shiyu's calm, wise, and arrogant eyes. Those eyes were supported by an incomparable strong self-confidence. Lu Jishi had only seen this look from her father. Even she was often not confident in her medical skills most of the time. Suddenly, a strong anxiety and panic rose in her heart. Could it be that what she said is true? However, before Lu Jishi could speak, Ren Shuling had already yelled, "Nonsense! Why have I never heard of this kind of illness in the world? Then you tell us how can you treat it? Humph, who doesn't know how to talk big?" Dr. Chun, who cared most about how to treat this disease, was more anxious than anyone else. He couldn't help but stepped forward and said, "Mr. Shi, you said that you want to eradicate the source of the disease in the young city lord. May I ask what kind of disease it is? How to eradicate it?" Hushi certainly knew that the source of Zhuge Xiaoyan's body was the porphyrin that would be affected by ultraviolet radiation, but she couldn't explain clearly to these ancient people. In addition to the blood exchange, the only step she did more than Lu Jishi was to expose the patient to sunlight when the medicinal pills were taking effect. It was to let the porphyrin in the patient's body combine with the iron element, so that it could be synthesized into hemoglobin normally. This seemingly simple step was actually the most important step. Hushi smiled slightly, and she suddenly raised her voice. "The way to completely cure this vampire disease is actually very simple. Just let the young city lord take a special kind of medicinal pill before exposing him to the sun." Chapter 983. I don't want to Master Yuehua stared at the handsome young man not far away, only to feel that there was a raging storm in his heart. It made his eye sockets hot and his body tremble. The people in Yangon City below were even more shocked. The discussion was even more vigorous than when Zhuge Xiaoyan's disease relapsed just now. Didn't they say that Master Yuehua can't refine pill anymore? Why did Shi Yu ask him to refine the pill? Shi Yu definitely doesn't know that Master Yuehua can't pill refining at all. The cloud marrow Ganoderma only has one portion. If it fails, isn't that the young city lord's disease can't be cured? Many doctors on the wall were excited when they heard the name cloud marrow Ganoderma. Some doctors even volunteered to do it. Mr. Shi, Master Yuehua is not incapable of pill refining, but he has not been refining pill for many years. Cloud marrow Ganoderma is so precious. What if he spoils it? Why don't you let me do it? Even Dr. Chun couldn't help asking, Mr. Shi, may I know what grade are the medicinal pill made by cloud marrow Ganoderma? Hushi smiled slightly. 4th grade. As soon as she said this, even Master Yuehua's face turned pale. Before his spiritual fire collapsed, he could at most refine the 3rd grade medicinal pills. Besides, those 3rd grade medicinal pills didn't even need precious materials like the cloud marrow Ganoderma. Those doctors even shook their heads. With Master Yuehua's level, he will definitely fail in refining this 4th grade medicinal pill. Mr. Shi, you must think twice. Ren Shuling laughed aloud and looked at Hushi with contempt and arrogance. Shi Yu, you insist on letting Master Yuehua refine the pill because you hope that he will fail, right? If that happens, you can shirk the responsibilities to Master Yuehua if you fail. Am I right? Hushi turned her gaze on Master Yuehua. Her eyes looked gloomy. Master Yuehua, are you willing to bear the stigma of deceiving the world forever? Always letting people point at your back. Never lift your head. Even getting chased out of Yangon City. Deprived of the qualifications to practice medicine. Are you willing to be a loser for the rest of your life? No. I don't want to, Master Yuehua's voice suddenly rose. His body was trembling violently because of exerting too much force. The lost and sad expression in his eyes disappeared, turning into firm and scorching eyes. He clenched his fists and looked at Hushi. Mr. Shi, I'm willing to try to refine the 4th grade medicinal pill. Hushi's face finally showed a slight smile. He walked to Master Yuehua and gave the pill refining materials prepared in the storage ring and the inscribed jade slip for the pill formula to Master Yuehua. After Master Yuehua took the inscribed jade slip and read it, his body trembled abruptly. When he looked at Hushi again, there were already hot tears in his eyes. Miracle healer Shi, your great kindness, I really don't know how to repay it. If Miracle healer Shi wants me to do anything, I will agree without hesitation. It turned out that in the inscribed jade slip Hushi gave him, it recorded not only the pill formula for treating Zhuge Xiaoyan's disease, but also various pill formulas for treating his Dantian's disease and improving his cultivation and medical skills. As long as he used the medicinal pills and these pill formulas Shi Yu gave him, in less than a month, the disease that had plagued him for 10 years would be completely cured. His cultivation would also exceed his past heyday. But Master Yuehua seemed to be totally unaware, staring intently at the refining of medicinal pills in the pill furnace. He even forgot where he was now and who was next to him. More than half an hour passed, and it was still dead silent under the city wall. Everyone looked at the white-haired old man, watching him clearly painful but attentively refining medicinal pills, and they suddenly felt a little hot in their eye sockets and a little sour in their noses. Some martial artist who had survived for a long time seemed to think of the times more than 10 years ago. When the plague that made all the people in Yangon City desperate was rampant, it was the same doctor who refined medicinal pills and took care of the patients without resting. He didn't even care even he had vomited blood. Finally, he found a way to control the plague. Chapter 985. Failed? He was the savior of the entire Yangon City. Suddenly, someone yelled, Master Yuehua, You will be able to pill refining successfully. Yes, Master Yuehua, we support you. Master Yuehua, we did wrong in the past. Whether you can pill refining or not, you are our most respected master. The people of Yangon City under the city wall began to shout one after another, at first a few dozen, and then for some reason, half of them were infected and began to shout nonstop. Zhuge Feng listened to the voice under the city wall, then looked at his friend who was focusing in pill refining. For some reason, he felt hot in his eyes. He quickly wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes and continued to wait patiently. The faces of Li Jinyu and the others were getting more and more gloomy. Ren Shuling gritted her teeth and said, "What? Isn't he just a fourth-rank doctor? Why are these people making a commotion? Sister, don't worry, he will not succeed in pill refining. With his spiritual fire, refining the third-grade medicinal pills is already hard, let alone the fourth-grade medicinal pills. Humph, when he fails, let's see if those people down there still support Master Yuehua." Lu Jishi was also looking in Master Yuehua's direction, but there was no expression on her face when she heard that. She said in a low and panicked tone, "But what if he succeeds in refining?" Shiyu is so confident. Maybe he can really succeed in refining? The low voice was gentle and sweet, but it described an unspeakable helplessness. This was the first time Li Jinyu had felt Lu Jishi's fragility and fear. For a while, he only felt that the blood in his whole body was surging up. He was willing if he was going to die for her. He gritted his teeth and said coldly, "Jishi, rest assured, I will never let him succeed." Li Jinyu's eyes were gloomy and cold, staring in the direction of Master Yuehua. At this time, Master Yuehua's body was dripping with cold sweat. His face was even player, but there was hope in his eyes. Almost. He already felt the medicinal effect of the cloud marrow Ganoderma enveloping other medicinal pills. They were about to merge with each other and condense into pills. He would soon be able to successfully refine the pill. This was the fourth-grade medicinal pill, and its main material was the cloud marrow Ganoderma. Just as Master Yuehua was happily looking forward to it, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his back. Ah! A short scream, interrupting him from channeling spiritual power. Master Yuehua fell to the ground because of the pain, but he didn't care about his pain at all, and his eyes widened suddenly, looking at the gray pill cauldron with a frightened expression. Because of the interruption of the spiritual power supply, the pill cauldron that was originally flashing red suddenly dimmed, and the materials that had already been condensed also collapsed. A curl of black smoke rose above the pill cauldron. Pill refining has failed? Master Yuehua was trembling all over. He suddenly turned his head, staring fiercely in Li Jinyu's direction, and let out a stern shout. "You! It's you! You just sneak-attacked me, didn't you? You! How can you do this? How can you do this? That is the only cloud marrow Ganoderma. How can you be so vicious?" There was a weird silence in the audience. Immediately afterward, there was an uproar under the city wall. Some people, who had just been immersed in the emotions, couldn't even believe their eyes now. The pill refining actually failed. Even if Shi wanted to prove whether he could cure the young city lord, he couldn't do so now. The matter had entered a stalemate. At this moment, Hushi, who had been watching silently, took a step forward, came to the cauldron, and slowly said, "Elderly, you said I can't prove that I can cure the young city lord's disease, isn't it?" Li Jinyu sneered at him. His eyes were full of mockery. Cloud marrow Ganoderma only has a unique portion. You can find another one either in a short time. Now that the pill refining fails, how can you prove that you can cure the young city lord? Chapter 987. Going crazy? Hushi smiled slightly. Because of such a smile, Hushi's face looked more fascinating. Who told you that the pill refining failed? What are you talking about? Li Jinyu was taken aback, then he laughed. Shiyu, you can't even judge whether the pill refining has failed or not? The spiritual power supply is interrupted before the medicinal pills condense, so how is this not a failure? Hushi raised her eyebrows slightly and said with a chuckle, "Oh, really? Then, keep your eyes open and take a good look at what is called pill refining." As soon as the sentence ended, a golden red fire suddenly condensed from her fingertip. Golden red? Golden red? It is the golden red fire? Before the people underneath hadn't responded, the doctors on the wall had already widened their eyes with a look of horror. Lu Jishi even exclaimed, "How is this possible?" The golden red spiritual fire is a pure flame that only martial artists above the nascent soul stage can condense with their own dantian fire. Even my father, Lu Shuyang, the president of the Doctors Association, has just purified the purity of spiritual fire to such a degree in the past 10 years. How old is this Shiyu? His cultivation seems to be the foundation establishment stage. Why? Why can he condense the golden red spiritual fire? Hushi didn't care about the reactions of the people on the city wall at all. The spiritual fire was sent lightly into the pill refining cauldron. The pill refining cauldron was quickly relit with a golden red light. But it was totally different from the exclamation of everyone when the spiritual fire appeared just now. At this moment, everyone watching Hushi's actions couldn't help shaking their heads. How could it be possible to recondense the medicinal pills that have failed to condense? Such a thing has never happened in the Miluo continent before. How can it be successful? Ren Shuling even said with a smile in Lu Jishi's ear, "Senior sister, is this kid going crazy? He want to recondense the failed materials again. He is simply dreaming." Lu Jishi smiled slightly and did not speak. Although she still felt sullen seeing the golden red fire, she would never believe that medicinal pills that had failed to condense could be refined again. This was absolutely impossible. However, as the time passed, the flame in the cauldron became brighter and brighter. The black smoke that was still wafting away disappeared without a trace, and it was replaced by a vague scent of medicinal fragrance. The medicinal fragrance had already dispersed before the pill was condensed, and it gave an indescribable refreshing feeling to those who smelled it. The doctors on the city wall who had just laughed at Hushi for bragging gradually lost their composures. Dr. Chen took a step closer, sniffed it hard, and tremblingly said, How can this medicinal fragrance be so strong? When I refined the 5th grade medicinal pills, it didn't have such a strong and pure medicinal fragrance too." He couldn't help but tiptoed and glanced into the pill cauldron. Then he released the doctor's unique divine sense to explore. He immediately blurted out in shock, "It's condensing. The pills are starting to condense. How can this be?" As soon as Dr. Chan said this, everyone on the city wall was shocked, and then there was a commotion. Could it be possible that failed medicine can really be recondensed into pills? But how is this possible? At the moment of failing, the spiritual power of the medicinal pills should have disappeared, right? I only know that if anyone dares to hurt Shiyu in front of me, I will make him pay thousands of times back. Lu Jishi's pupils shrank suddenly, and she clenched her fists. She didn't even notice the nails sinking into the palms. Before Lu Jishi could speak, the little golden dragon who flew out had already sneered and said, "Some people have tried to plot against others, but this time they hit the wall hard and got retaliated. They actually dare to blame the others shamelessly too." Chapter 989. Wasn't it too much? Little Egg immediately agreed, and he pointed at Li Jinyu and shouted, "You shameless villain! You were the one who attacked Grandpa Yuehua just now. I saw it all. Now that my daddy taught you a lesson, you deserve it." Imo Xiaodu also clapped her hands and laughed. "Yeah, last time. This bad guy even wanted to bite me with a poisonous snake. He is so bad." She also pointed at Fairy Jishi. "This big sister is pretty and beautiful, but she is definitely not a good person if she mixes with this kind of bad guy." These few people and spiritual pets spoke without scruples, but their voices were loud, so that everyone under the city wall could hear them clearly. The people below burst into rage. Could it be that elderly really attacked Master Yuehua just now? Isn't that too much? Didn't Master Yuehua look really strange just now? He didn't look like he was lack of spiritual power at all. It should be right. Li Jinyu is Yunlan's sect's sword-holding elder. He is so famous. How could he do such a thing? If he really did it, isn't Fairy Jishi, who mixes with this kind of person, also? Lu Jishi's face turned extremely pale as she listened to the discussion from everyone below. She gritted her teeth and said, Shiyu, I know you did so much just because you want to beat me and try to be famous with my reputation so that everyone will notice you. Now, you have won. You did it. Even if you can't cure the young city lord, you now have huge reputation already. But why do you still want to drag the others down? Is Lu Jishi not enough? You even have to step on Master Yuehua, Shuling, and Jinyu to get your reputation. Don't you think you are too much? Lu Jishi's remarks were extremely serious. Her words contained deep resentment and grievance. The people who were talking about Li Jinyu suddenly calmed down, and they looked at Hushi with doubts again. They still had deep respect and admiration for Fairy Jishi. Therefore, although things were getting weird, now that Fairy Jishi had spoken, they still somehow believed in her. However, Hushi turned a deaf ear to Lu Jishi's words. Because the pill refining had reached the most critical moment, the strong medicinal fragrance spread on the city wall along with the mellow spiritual power, and the cover above the pill cauldron also made a buzzing sound. Suddenly, the pill cauldron's cover was bounced away with a bang, and it fell to the ground with a harsh sound. Little Egg usually used this gray pill cauldron to refine pills. Now seeing the cover was bounced away, the little guy suddenly felt distressed. He rushed to pick up the cover and put it back into the void. But no one would notice Little Egg's behavior at all. Everyone couldn't help taking a step forward, looking into the pill cauldron. According to the normal pill refining process, the air holes on the top of the pill cauldron would emit a strong medicinal fragrance and buzz, but the cover would not be bounced away. Could it be that the process of refining the waste residues into medicinal pills failed in the end? Master Yuehua almost jumped onto the pill cauldron, and he widened his eyes and looked into the pill cauldron with a trembling body. Then, his eyes widened in disbelief. What appeared in front of him was not a batch of waste residues nor a batch of the fourth-grade medicinal pills that the normal doctor usually refined. Chapter 990. Only chance what appeared in front of him were dozens of fourth-grade medicinal pills. The total was 80. How can this be? How can there be 80 fourth-grade medicinal pills in one batch? 20 is usually the limit. How come there are so many? As if in response to Master Yuehua's thoughts, other doctors' exclamations soon came into his ears. This should at least have 70 to 80 medicinal pills, right? Hushi on the side listened to their screams one after another, but she couldn't help letting out a sigh. Refining the waste residues into medicinal pills is indeed flawed. Not only the pills are reduced by half, but the color of these medicinal pills is still a little behind the best quality pill. It is only slightly better than those that Little Egg refined. The doctors on the wall were stunned, looking at Hushi as if they were looking at a monster. If they were told before today that someone could recondense the failed waste residues into medicinal pills, they would never believe it. If they were told that someone could refine 84th-grade medicinal pills in one refine, they wouldn't believe in it at all. However, now the truth was right in front of them. Every action of Shiyu was done under their eyes, so there was no way that they were deceived. The doctors of Yangon City no longer dared to look down on this young doctor who was only 17 years old. They even looked at her with respect. Hushi didn't care about them. Instead, she took 3 medicinal pills and came to Zhuge Xiaotian. She said in a light voice, "Take these 3 medicinal pills and meditate for half an hour. Then you won't be afraid of the sun anymore. There won't be botulinum toxin in your body anymore." Zhuge Xiaotian stretched out his hands that still had some red spots, took over the medicinal pills tremblingly, and said after a long time, "Miracle healer Shi, what kind of medicinal pills are these? After I take them, I really I really can be a normal person? Zhuge Xiaoyan's voice was slightly hoarse and trembling. He clearly remembered the scene where he had just gone mad on the city wall and turned into a vampire monster. And everyone in Yangon City saw this. They regarded him as a terrifying and ugly monster. Now even the guards on the city wall glanced at him from time to time and hurried away. Their expressions were full of fear and disgust. Zhuge Xiaotian thought at the time that his life was over. Even if he was cured in the future, the people of Yangon City could no longer treat him as a normal person. Everyone would associate him with the terrifying monster. However, at the moment of his despair, the boy named Shiyu gave him the only chance. Zhuge Xiaotian felt that his ears still seemed to hear Hushi's words. When Hushi treated him, she said softly in his ear, "Don't worry, they are afraid of you because of the unknown and fear. As long as we prove that you just got an illness that everyone could have, and you can be treated, they will treat you as a normal person again." The death and despair in Zhuge Xiaoyan's eyes, because of these sentences, were once again ignited by hope. So when the scene just happened, he waited quietly, waiting for the handsome boy in front to turn him into a normal person. Hushi frowned and said, "This medicine is researched by me in conjunction with the vampire disease. I haven't thought of its name yet, but since its main material is cloud marrow Ganoderma, then I'll call it cloud marrow pill." Ren Shuling smiled even more gloatingly. "Who told you not to listen to my senior sister's advice just now? Now you are taking your own consequences." Lu Zhishi's eyes flashed slightly, but she looked concerned on her face. She stepped forward and said, "City Lord Zhuge, it is better to let me diagnose and treat the young city lord. If there is any problem with the medicinal pills, maybe it is still not too late." Zhuge Feng was taken aback for a moment. Then he looked back and forth at Shi Yu and Lu Zhishi, and he almost agreed to it. Suddenly, he saw that his son, who was still in pain, looked calm all of a sudden. He got up, sat down cross-legged, and started to channel his spiritual power. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.